Before we get started, please go over to Amazon.com and grab a copy of my book, Education and Justice. If you have an African-American son in public school, you need this book because I teach you the many ways that public schools mistreat African-American boys and what you can do to help your son. So go over there and get your copy immediately. So as we all know, Pope Francis died a few days ago, and his funeral is coming up, and the selection of the next pope as well. And I want to, in this video, share with you why I think the next pope should be a Black African. A Black African. So let's jump right into this. The Black African that I'm advocating for is Cardinal Peter Turkson. This man in front of you right here. This man, this African man, this Black African should become the next pope. And I'm going to lay out for you why I make that statement. Now, first of all, I'm not a Catholic. I am a Protestant. I am a Pentecostal/Baptist preacher, Christian believer. And I have been all my life. And so the first thing someone may ask is, why does your opinion even matter? This is a Catholic issue. Why does it matter? Well, there are a number of reasons why non-Catholics' opinions on this matter counts. All right, for example, global influence. The Pope reigns over 1.3 billion individuals. So his voice affects foreign policy, diplomacy, public ethics, social justice, and so much more. So what he says and does impact the world, not just the 1.3 billion, which is like 1 out of every 6 people on the planet. So that's the first reason. The second reason is he provides moral leadership. He's globally seen as the world's moral conscience, especially on issues of poverty, migration, war, and human rights, and especially regarding the Christian church. So that's another reason why. Now here he is here in a picture, the late Pope Francis in a picture with many world leaders. Okay? Shared Christian witness. How the Pope speaks for Christ affects the way the world perceives all Christians, not only Catholics. So in a large measure, he represents Christians around the world. I'm in that bunch. So therefore, my opinion certainly does matter, and the opinion of other non-Catholics. Partnerships in justice. Catholics and Protestants routinely collaborate on missions, disaster relief, and social justice. His role impacts those partnerships. So yet another reason why our opinion matter. So this is probably the greatest reason our opinion matters. Because both Protestants and Catholics originated from the same place, the crucifixion of Christ and his resurrection. All right? Also, Black and African representation. A cardinal like Cardinal Turkson would be a strong signal of racial and global equality in Christianity. And right now in our country, equity, diversity, inclusion, justice, racial, social, otherwise, is under attack. And having a Black African in this position would be a huge way to silence or at least blunt some of that anti-Blackness that we see in America. And not just America, Africa, by the way. There are countries over there that are trying to liberate themselves from their colonial masters, if you will. And those colonial masters are pushing back. So having this Black man in that position would help with that cause as well. So I think there are some pretty strong reasons there as to why non-Catholics should voice their opinion about who should become the next pope. All right, so let me introduce the man to you for those of you who don't know him. Of course, Catholics know him already, most likely, and of course, Catholics on the continent of Africa knows the Cardinal, but most of us don't. And I'm certainly not an expert of this man, but I've done my research. So let's talk about him. So Cardinal Peter Turkson, who was born in 1948 in Ghana, is one of the most influential African leaders within the Catholic Church. He studied theology in New York and further biblical studies in Rome, becoming Ghana's first cardinal in 2003. I've been to Ghana, love the place. I've been to other countries in West Africa, and having Cardinal Turkson in that position would be a huge lift to that whole region. All right? So his early life and education, and here's a picture of him and the late Pope Francis, which shows you that they were pretty close. Turkson was the fourth of 10 children in a large family. His parents were his father, a Catholic carpenter, and his mother, a Methodist who had converted to Catholicism. He studied to be a priest at St. Teresa Seminary, Amasano, and St. Peter's Regional Seminary, Pedu. Now, some of these Italian words and African words, I'm not going to be able to pronounce them correctly. I'll do the best I can. He held senior Vatican positions, such as President of the Pontifical Council for Justice and Peace. Some of the positions this esteemed scholar and clergy held. Prefect of the Dicastery for Human Development. Chancellor of the Pontifical Academies of Sciences and Social Sciences. So Cardinal Turkson is an internationalist champion of economic justice, climate action, and human dignity. That is awesome. He's aligned with Pope Francis' justice agenda and has spoken forcefully on these issues, ranging from racism and colonialism to the church's complicity in historic injustices. This would be so refreshing to have a black man in that seat of power, that extraordinary seat of power, with these convictions and interests. All right. As Catholicism grows fastest in Africa, I'm going to talk about that in just a moment, Turkson represents the future of the church, spiritually rooted, socially active, and globally relevant. His papacy would reflect the makeup and direction of a rising global South church. All right. Now, the reasons he should be the next pope. Here are the reasons why I believe he would be the perfect pick. First, his qualifications. All right, so I've gone over those qualifications a little. Let's look at some more. He's scandal-free. To my knowledge, I researched everywhere I could research, and I couldn't find any sort of scandal. All right. Second, as we said, he's the former president of the Pontifical Council for Justice and Peace. That really says a lot in my mind because, once again, justice and peace, both economic, political, social justice, is under attack right now. And having this man in this position would be a great boost to the fight and struggle for justice. So we saw that he has held key Vatican roles under both Benedict and Francis. And this picture here shows that the people love him, the Ghanaians love him, and he apparently loves them. He's a multilingual, respected theologian, and has a voice for social justice. I understand he speaks fluently French and many other languages. I don't know exactly, but he's very fluent in a few, not just one or two, but a few languages. That would help him immensely. And we see here repeatedly, and I'm going to continue to repeat it, he's an advocate for the poor, for climate justice, and for Catholic unity. Now, let's talk about the expansion of Catholicism in Africa. To put it shortly, Catholicism is exploding in Africa. Now, this chart here shows us of all the 1.3 billion Catholics in the world, what percentages are on various continents. And at the top of the list, currently 41%, which is 560 million, are in Latin America. 22% Europe. 18% in sub-Saharan Africa. So sub-Saharan Africa, that's pretty much West Africa and the southern parts of Africa where you have most of the black people. 18% of the 1.3 billion people in the Catholic Church, are sub-Saharan Africans. But that is changing fast because, let's go to the next graph, because of the growth of Catholicism on the continent of Africa, in sub-Saharan Africa especially. 3.31%. I mean, that is explosive growth. And it tops the chart of all the other continents, way above the growth in the Americas, in Asia, in Europe, in Oceania. It is exploding. And meanwhile, it is basically dwindling in these other regions. Europe, for example, where most of the popes have been from. It is dwindling there. So why should they continue to lead the Catholic Church when it's dwindling in their regions and exploding in Africa? So to me, this is one of the greatest reasons why Cardinal Turkson should be the next pope. Okay? All right. Celebrating African contributions to Christendom. So, early church fathers such as Tertullian, Origen, Augustine were North Africans. They were Africans, which is why I specify the next pope should be a black African. There have been Northern African church fathers, and these three church fathers here are very significant in Christian theology, especially St. Augustine. But the black region of the continent of Africa has also contributed to Christendom. And that means Catholicism as well as Protestantism. And putting this man in that position would help highlight and honor African contributions to Christendom. Okay? Africans today in Catholicism contribute substantially in theology, liturgy, and social leadership. These are AI-created pictures, Augustine, Tertullian, Origen, and it's important that we see men of color, because if you look at these pictures from, if you go online and just basically put these names in, they're all going to look like they came from Germany or Ireland or some other part of Europe, Northern Europe. And it's not true. We just read these men were from North Africa. And they were alive back when a lot of the North Africans were people of brown skin, even dark skin. So let's tell the truth about how these men likely looked. Okay? The church has to highlight the profound spiritual legacy of African Christians, because if you don't do your own research about Christianity, you would think that blacks made virtually no contribution to Christianity. And it's the reason why so many people believe that Christianity is a white religion. It's not a white religion. It is a whitewashed religion, but it's not a white religion. The Bible was not written by white people. No. But that's what the average person thinks, because there has not been a recognition and celebration of the rich contributions that Africans have made to Christianity. Okay? All right, let's go back. Now, it is time for the Catholic Church to have a reckoning of its complicity and contributions to the evil legacy of slavery, the evil legacy of colonialism, and the evil work of neocolonialism, which is what we are experiencing now. All right, so let's take a look at this. The church has to own up to its role, like I said, in slavery, colonialism, and institutional racism. Papal bulls legitimized slavery of non-Christians. They gave basically the okay, permission slips to be involved in the institution of slavery. So that came with a blessing from the Catholic Church. Many of the enslavers, those very racist founders of the country, many of them were Catholics. Catholic orders, like the Jesuits, owned slaves in Brazil, the Caribbean, and the United States. And here are my citation right here, NYU Press. And the church really didn't oppose slavery until 1888, which was some 20-something years after slavery had been abolished. It's time to have a serious reckoning. The Catholic Church was a huge part of the oppression of African American people and African people, the African diaspora around the world. Making Cardinal Peter Turkson the Pope would go a long ways toward that reckoning, not just in terms of trying to right wrongs from history, but also because he would help right some of the wrongs that are currently happening. And besides all that, the man is extremely qualified. All right, this is not some sort of DEI argument. He is extremely qualified for that position. European clergy assisted in blessing empires that exploited African resources and labor. Absolutely, when the Portuguese began its slavery conquest, the captain of those ships had to get commission from the church, had to get commission from the church, from the Catholic Church, from the kings, who were by and large Catholics. So the roots of the Catholic Church run very, very deep in slavery and colonialism. Catholic missions also cooperated with European empires for the purposes of spreading religion and domination. The Catholic schools suppressed African languages, religions, and customs. Land, funds, and authority were given to the church by colonial authorities. So the Vatican is very, very steeped in Black oppression. I mean, that's just the truth. That country, yes, by the way, the Vatican is a country in and of itself. And it is steeped in Black oppression, like I said. And it's time for a reckoning. And it's time for a new direction. Electing an African pope would be a powerful gesture of recognition and reconciliation. But now don't misunderstand me. I am not saying just because they put Peter Turkson in that position, that would absolve their responsibility in terms of paying reparations. No, the Catholic Church is absolutely on the hook for reparations for what it did to African people. Those papal bulls were not just permission slips, but edicts I mean, that came from the Pope. The Pope said to Catholics that it is okay. It does not violate Scripture to enslave and oppress and colonize these African people. They should have to pay for that. Reparations should be paid, and perhaps Cardinal Peter Turkson could also facilitate the payment of reparations. This is, after all, a Christian body that should want to do right and follow Scripture, and reparations are consistent with Scripture. Now, his appointment will also keep the church, the Catholic Church, concerned for economic justice. That was the heart of Pope Francis. And obviously, it is the heart of Cardinal Peter Turkson as well. They were united in that effort. So putting Cardinal Turkson in that position would keep the Catholic Church focused on something that is very, very important, especially right now, again, as some African countries are trying to free itself from the European colonial masters. Right? They're trying to free themselves, like Burkina Faso. So yes, putting him in that position would absolutely keep the Catholic Church concerned about economic justice, and therefore would prevent it from continuing its legacy of supporting the oppression of Black people. And the late Pope Francis, again, this was his heart, but quite frankly, he could have done more. And maybe Cardinal Peter Turkson will take it 2 or 3, 4, 5, or 10 steps further. Okay? So yes, he shared Pope Francis' concern about the poor, action on climate control, and economic justice. He would likely still push, therefore, efforts like the Global South Empowerment effort, where countries in Africa, Latin America, the Caribbean, Asia, oceanic areas will get the needed attention they need. Economic relief, debt relief, because these countries have been victims of colonialism, of slavery. And so it is time that the Catholic Church genuinely does its part to push empowerment in those countries and regions specifically. And here's a map that shows you the areas that they call the Global South. So we see it's Latin America, we see it's Africa, we see China here. Now, economic inequality. Certainly the Cardinal Turkson would fight and push for economic equality, because it's just a shame. It is shameful. I mean, shameful that Africa has all those natural resources, and European countries and America have exploited those countries and stolen all of that wealth over a long period of time. It is shameful that that continues to happen. And having Cardinal Turkson in that position hopefully would address, even stop that. Now, obviously, the more I talk about this, clearly what I'm saying would be the reason why a lot of people will push for him to never become the Pope. Because that would just put a lot of pressure on those European Western nations that want to continue to steal Africa's resources. Nevertheless, I'm still pushing it and praying that it happens. Okay, let's go back. Ecological conversion. The climate. Yes, that is an issue. I know the folks who lead our country right now doesn't give 2 cents about climate change and so on. But it's real. It's very real. So those are the reasons why I believe this man should become the next pope of the Catholic Church. All right? I would love for you to join me in this. I would love for you to pray for this to happen. I would love for you to talk about it and share this video with others, because I think I laid out some compelling reasons why having him in this position would benefit not just sub-Saharan Africa, not just Africa, but the African people, the African diaspora, the world even. So I am rooting for him. I am rooting for him. Okay? So eventually, the next day or so, they're going to funeralize Pope Francis. And I think some weeks or days after that, the conclave will meet and select the next pope. I'm hoping that it will be Cardinal Peter Turkson. All right, thank you for watching this video. Until the next time, remember, I'm Reverend and Civil Rights Attorney Augustus Corbett. Stay woke.